everyone. Thank you for tuning in for another episode of Paranomaly Beyond Disclosure. We are a weekly podcast dedicated to sincere, in-depth investigations into the paranormal, supernatural, and the metaphysical, with a special focus on the UFO topic. We take a sincere, analytical approach, thoroughly evaluating each case and its implications. Our discussions go beyond the surface as we engage with researchers, investigators, and experiencers to explore the deeper layers of their testimonies. We strive for high-resolution analysis, carefully examining evidence, patterns, and perspectives that challenge conventional thinking. If you're looking for a podcast that seeks deeper understanding, you're in the right place. Please be sure to like and subscribe and follow to receive notifications when new content is made available. You can also visit us at www.paranormallypodcast.com for more content and information, including all our social links. Thank you again for watching or listening, and we hope to see you on the next episode of Paranomaly Beyond Disclosure. Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in and watching and things like that. We have a great show coming up. We have Penny Bradley on, and it's an honor to have her on. She has been
make me blush.
she has been through a lot, folks, and she's here to tell us a little about what she's went through. Penny, thank you so much for coming on. Tell us just a little bit about yourself.
Because most of my story happened in a time loop, it feels like I have lived two lives, and they're very different from one another, and I have no memories from before the abduction. So it's like that was when both of them started, was when I was taken and then I came back, because even though it was a time loop, I experienced all of it first and then this one. So I grew up on Mars first.
That's interesting. I've never heard it put that way. I always struggle with understanding that aspect of it, because it seems like, the way that it happens is they're simultaneous, but your sort of experience of it, it feels as if the Mars timeline happened prior to the Earth timeline for some reason or other, even though technically speaking they were parallel.
They were parallel in the same timeline. I was actually in California and Langley Air Force Base at the same time through the late 50s, early 60s. And then the Mars loop started in 1964. And from that point, I was off-world until 2014, when I was sent back to 1959.
Which I think is interesting, because you kind of were in the programs pretty far up until the present day.
I still have alters taken, and I'm still abducted at least once a week.
Interesting.
And I have not been able to get that to stop. I did tell them the last time they showed up, I said, if you're going to keep taking me, you're going to have to fix my body, because I'm falling apart.
Right, which maybe at some point, if they still require you for something, which they evidently do, they'll be compelled to do that, maybe.
The abilities that I was given through CRISPR tech are very rare, even among the people that they've done CRISPR tech to. It's like they got it just exactly right with me, and they haven't with everyone. So some of the people they thought would become navigators were unable to do it, and a lot of them had other issues where the CRISPR tech didn't work right. And some of them ended up being fabulous telepaths. Some of them can do teleportation. Some of them can do telekinesis, but they can't fly the ship. And that was what the program was about, was getting people who could fly the ship. So,
and so that's pretty rare. And it seems like in the SSP, they typically don't use, from what you said, I think, they typically don't have human navigators. They have other species doing that job.
it's usual. There are two types of technology that I'm aware of. One was given to the human programs by the Alpha Dracs. That's the one that the Germans in space use. The other one was from the Zetas, and that's the one that the Americans tend to use. Yeah.
Interesting.
That's a detail that people tend to blur. I served primarily with the Germans in space, and they use a completely different technology setup than the Americans do.
In the technology in question here, we're talking about like the wetware essentially that's inside you.
Everything.
Okay.
Everything. From how the ships are built or grown, from the medical technology, because the Germans use a regeneration tank where the Americans use med beds, and even the techniques to go into hyperspace are different. And you have to Matt Tracy came up with a beautiful analogy that you have to be able to blow into the breathalyzer and prove you have that specific piece of Draco DNA before the engine will turn on for you.
Is that right, really? Huh.
So it's that tightly done. And Matt Tracy and I have served on multiple ships together, and usually the third is a Draco. And some commanders who are humans from Earth are really prejudiced against reptilians of any kind, especially the Draconians. So I've gotten pushback from those people because the bit of DNA that they used on me makes it where I can be in the same room with a Draco for all day, every day. Most humans are not hardwired for that.
That doesn't surprise me. I never heard that before, but it seems like to be in the presence of a Draco is taxing. It seems like
they have a really, really high energy field, and they practice full intimacy telepathy, and that's to prove they're not being deceitful. Honor is a really big deal to them, so they're proving they're not being deceitful. They share everything in their head with everything in your head, and in the process it feels like they're pulling your brain out through your eyeballs.
So there's different modalities of telepathy, and what you're describing is a full sort of mind-to-mind where you are interlinked, and you're exposed to them, and they're completely exposed to everything in you.
Now, when I do link up with humans on Earth, I practice what's called front door telepathy. I'm only seeing what you're thinking about in the now. It's nothing deep. I'm not hearing anything about your past unless you wander off and think about it. But I don't really scan people very often because I sometimes have trouble unlinking from them. Sometimes people are so hungry for that connection with someone that it's really hard to get them to let go. And then other people, it's like once they realize that I'm listening to their surface thoughts, they completely freak out because they don't think that's possible. But that's part of the CRISPR tech. Now, beforehand you wanted to talk about how I got here. Okay. I had a regression experience in 2015. After my memories were activated, I saw a QHHT Dolores Cannon trained hypnotist.
Okay.
I live near Yosemite and she was in Tracy, so this was an all-day event. And because I was on Social Security disability, she let me pay half price, which was a real blessing because this is not a cheap process.
No, I know it's not a process that can be done in 1 or 2 sessions. You know, if you're a 20 hacker.
Well, I didn't know what was going on, and so I was asking, you know, why do I feel like I'm a reptile? And that was when my subconscious came forward and told me about the CRISPR tech that was used and told me that it was through military laboratories. And I've done research to find out military laboratories is now called DARPA. But in 1955, before I was born, it was military laboratories.
So that was the actual title.
Yeah,
so that wasn't a generic term. That's what it was actually called.
That's what it was actually called.
Yeah.
And it was not CIA. It was not DOD. It was kind of it was a tool for all of them. They had lots of different projects going on, but these were scientists who were under contracts for different agencies. And when, Doris Neely, who is a retired CIA archivist, said that when she uploaded my file in the 1980s, that my packet was between 5 and 6 inches tall, sitting there on the table. It was about this big, and that it came from the OSS. That shocked me because I thought the OSS had been disbanded in 1947, long before I was born. But she said that it just went dark. So my particular program was through the OSS.
So do you think that, just to quickly interject here, do you think that could be an indication that you were being used during that time frame, that maybe it didn't just start at 1964 after the Langley thing? Maybe you were sent back during. I mean, do you have full recall of everything? Could it be possible that there's other offshoots of your experience that went back into other points in time when the OSS was operational?
I was part of the Montauk program, so I would say anything's possible. But my primary story that we were going to talk about was before I was born. My mom saw a doctor that made her basically starve. So I was a 10-month baby and I was 4 pounds, which, if you've got any children, that's very small. And especially for a baby that's a month overdue. And I kept having these flashes of seeing another baby. So I did have I did have questions about that during the regression too. I walked into her office with this list of 10 questions, and I have the recording, but I haven't shared it with anybody because most of it was personal stuff. And the answer was that I did have a twin sister, and that in the process of CRISPRing me, she died. I think they actually thought they were going to get 2 of us, but the process killed her. And so I was born in October of 1955. And I'm not going to use the exact date because that's one of those things they use to identify you at the doctor. So I have real reasons for that. And
yeah, understood.
But I was the firstborn, and that is important because my family, our bloodline.
Grail bloodline.
Grail bloodline.
So is that the same thing as Merovingian bloodline?
Yeah.
Not to get too sidetracked on that, but for the sake of the audience, that means the bloodline stemming from
Jesus himself, yes. We are also the bloodline of Cayenne, who was the first human king in Sumeria, way back 5,000 years ago. The Bible calls him Cain and says a lot of stuff about him that I'm not sure which story is true. So I'm just going to leave it at that. The Bible calls him Cain, but he was the first human king in Sumeria, and he's on the Sumerian kings list. And the Sumerian kings list states the kingship was lowered from heaven to Cayenne. And that is the official legal basis for the divine right of kings. Now, reality is, I'm a peasant. I have no titles. I have no lands. I have no money. Whatever money I have had, I put into my podcast. So I'm not any better than anybody else. And I'm disabled, so arguably I'm not as good as everybody else. I'm not claiming any special status. I am stating that the agency who targets us for SSP is looking for people with those genetics, but don't have power, money, or land. They want people with those genetics that nobody cares what happens to them.
Right, so they can be hung out to dry and used to the maximum.
Yes.
Right. So you don't have title or fame or any of those things, but those genetics and that bloodline did bestow you with some kind of attributes that were necessary.
I don't know whether I don't know what I would have had without the Draco CRISPR.
Yeah, difficult to parse.
It's hard to know what's this, or this when you've got them all for as long as you can remember.
Right.
I do have some.
Maybe it's the compatibility. Maybe the CRISPR technology was only compatible with certain. Because is this the same? I'd like to get on with the story, but just real quick, is this the same bloodline potentially as David Icke, say, refers to when he talks about the reptilian bloodlines and the elite factions that are the controllers and how they are a particular bloodline? Is this the same bloodline, you think, or do you think that this is
I think he's telling stories. Okay. I'll be honest, I don't shapeshift, so I don't believe that my cousins do.
Yeah.
I've never seen any of them shapeshift. And, you know, my great-grandfather was a Windsor bastard. Now, one of the sons of Queen Victoria was his father, and so he was exiled to the United States. My father's that's my father's mother's family. My father's father's family, 5 generations before my dad, they were royals in the House of Stuart. And they were part of the mess that created the mess in Ulster. And then Cromwell came through and booted them, and they came to America, and we've been here for 300 years. So I've been isolated from the main part of the family for 300 years until I started putting this together in my family tree. Well, I didn't know we were anybody, so I made it public. That's a mistake, people. If you're going to do your family tree, keep it private until you know what you are. You know, the first time I found a castle in my family tree, I sat down and cried. I had no idea. I assumed he was the child of the maid, you know, that's why he was born in the castle. Found out he was the illegitimate son of Sir John Girlington of Thurland Castle in Lancashire, England. Yeah. And because he was a bastard, he couldn't inherit, so he was given money and sent to America. And his grandchildren were illiterate because America had no public schools in those days. And as people went west, schools didn't catch up for 100 years. So this is what happened to my family who were royals. Girlington was on my mother's side, and my mother's father's father was from the Girlingtons. My mother's father's mother was a seer, CYR. And people who live in Quebec know that name. And there was a Bourbon who married into my family. The Bourbon were the kings of France. Every direction I have gone, I have found a royal at the end of the line.
So it is.
It's
So
my
this
cousin, who is going to be the next head of the Medici family, looked at my tree and he said that I was more royal than the current head of the De Vere family. And that's supposed to be the Grail line. Not the Sinclairs, like Dan Brown said, the De Vere family.
So it is a bloodline that is connected. It's not just the Merovingian bloodline. It is a bloodline that seems to be connected with the elite dynasties. But
what you need to understand is it's not a council of 300. It's not 13 families. It's not 13 black nobility. It's one family that is so interbred that they're not more than fourth cousins.
Yeah.
And because of this 300-year distance, you know, that we've been in America, I'm a seventh cousin to these people. So kissing cousins, I am less inbred than they are, even though they're saying I'm more royal than they are. And how that happened, I have no clue. My parents say, well, we met in high school.
That's strange. And there's some kind of surreptitious way that they, you know, keep this bloodline, or they keep track of it and keep, so it's, I suppose something's going on. It wasn't just random that your father met your mother, that there's some kind of organization and behind the scenes hidden hands that are
Well, I'll put it
guiding.
this way. If you can find Strathmore, California on a map, and Daddy had a California accent and Mama had an Oklahoma accent, yeah. And they went to the same high school and they were 3 years apart. And Mama trapped him as a freshman.
Interesting. Yeah.
So yeah, it's I have no idea how it happened, but it did. And I have 4 younger brothers and sisters. There was a 5th one who died at 8 months. Mm-hmm. And we all have these small birth defects from the CRISPR tech. So in the bloodline, they only take the firstborn. This agency is taking all of them. All of the kids.
Well, so interesting. Well, so let's move on to
okay. My daddy was a preacher and a dairy worker. He could not get enough support as a preacher to support a growing family. And I was the first, and Mama popped out a baby every 1.5 years. And he eventually went to strictly dairy work because he could support us at that. But he was a religious fanatic in the Church of Christ Ante. And this was how I was raised here. So I was 4 years old. We were living in a trailer house, one of those silver looking things. And it had 2 bedrooms in it. And what is it they called them? A streamline or something?
Yeah, that's what I was just going to say. Yeah.
Yeah, one of those. And I was in my bed in pajamas that Mama had made. And it was, I think, July, maybe August, because it was hot. Windows were open. And these men in green fatigues came in and took me. And they had to have used something to put everybody else to sleep because Daddy would have killed them. That's the way it was. And everybody else was asleep. And the next morning, Mama found me on the front step, the metal step that comes up to the trailer. And my pajamas were inside out. And I couldn't speak English anymore.
Wow. So the entire, whatever, 60 plus years or whatever that was had happened
55.
By the time you were dropped off the next morning. And interestingly, your pajamas were turned inside out. Now, I found this really fascinating because typically, when you hear about, I refer to this, we're mainly focused on the abduction phenomenon, and I sometimes make mention of the quote unquote mistakes that ET abductors make, where they leave you somewhere different than where you're supposed to be, or sometimes it is the same exact thing with the pajamas. Your pajamas are on inside out, or you're missing a sock, or you're missing some piece of jewelry or something that you had on. And to me, it's unclear, exactly what this is, but it seems like some kind of breadcrumb clue that the ETs leave, which later on you latch onto and realize that, something had happened.
I wasn't taken by ETs. I was taken
I know, which is why
humans.
Yeah. But there seems to be that same aspect of the mistake. Why do you think they did that briefly, left you with your pajamas?
Because I was a problem. I have always thought differently from other people. and I don't know if it's from the CRISPR or if it's from something else. But I was diagnosed last year as being autistic. So I'm sure that had something to do with it. But I've had trouble fitting in with people. Mom told me I should play dumb, which generally just annoyed me. By the time I was in 5th grade, I was so angry that I scared people. That's a good description of it. But I came back. I didn't know who these people were. I didn't speak English anymore. My parents were.
Did you actually speak German?
I
Did
was
you
speaking
know
German when I came back, but my mother calls it that I was speaking gibberish.
So Penny, I have a question real quick. You was living in an Airstream, and these military people, they came and they took you.
Back in the day, we didn't lock doors.
What language did they speak? Were they speaking American or was it German?
They were speaking American.
Okay.
They put me in a Jeep with 3 or 4 other kids. I can't remember exactly. And I did notice the green fatigues. They sounded American, and they were in a green Korean War Jeep. And I paid attention to that because I used to drive a Jeep. Okay. Mine was primer red. But yeah.
And that was what year was this?
1959.
So 59, yes, Korean War type Jeep. Yes, okay.
And we drove cross country, these 2 men and 4 or 5 little kids in the back. And we drove cross country. We took Route 66 at night, so they wouldn't have to answer any questions. And a lot of the way we went through tunnels. Now, I know those were the tunnels for the maglev train system. They were being built then. And so we would go through these tunnels, and they were wide enough for 2 Jeeps to meet each other, or actually for 2 Mack trucks to meet each other. And you could be under one light bulb and you could barely see the other one, just so you would know where you were going. And they didn't use the headlights. I don't know why not, but we just drove in the dark.
That's an odd fact. I wonder why. Yeah.
And we just drove in the dark. It took us 6 days to get from Central California, because this was Tulare County. You can find it on the map.
And so sometimes they came out of the tunnels and drove on the surface, but only at night, and then went back into the tunnel for a stretch. And then was it kind of a mix of, they took some kind of route that was partially tunnels, partially surface?
Well, Route 66 only goes so far, because we were going to Langley, Virginia. And the interstate was being built then. This was the Eisenhower administration. This was when the interstate system was built.
Just being built, yeah.
So you have new roads, you have old roads, you have tunnels, you have all of this stuff. But it took us 6 days to get to Langley, Virginia. And we went to Langley Air Force Base, and we were on the base property, but we were not on the base. It was some building next to water, because I remember the water. I don't remember if it was a river or the ocean or what, but we were next to water. And we were in a sub-basement, and I don't know how deep it was, but it had been set up like an old hospital. everything was white. They pretty much copied that in Stranger Things, but everything was white. White. Stranger Things
Just
is
for utilitarian purposes, you think, or would you think there was some psychological ramification to them making it look like a hospital?
They were weird.
That's what I mean. Yeah, it seems like there could potentially be more than the surface level dimension to maybe why like a hospital.
I have tried to not dwell on what happened there. There were 1,000 of us when we got there. We each had our own little cell.
All children your age?
We ranged from 3 to 8. So we weren't all the same age, but we were all little. And the rooms, the cells, were closed, all white inside, child-sized cot, child-sized toilet, child-sized sink, no mirrors. There was one window in the door so that they could look in and see if we were rocking, because rocking is a sign of going catatonic. And they had a regen tank. And I woke up in it more than once, but it could bring you back from the dead for, and I woke up in it a lot, actually. And
in the liquid? Were you in the liquid?
In the liquid, the green gel, but it was dark. So it was like one of those desensitization tanks where you don't feel anything because the gel's the same temperature you are, and and there's no light, and you don't hear anything. And I wondered a lot of times, did they let me stay dead? So there's that psychological torture on top of it. And every day, well, usually every day, sometimes more than once one day, and then other days there wouldn't be anybody at all. So it was very random. There would be a man dressed in white with a clipboard, and he would come in and he would say, "Take off your pants." And I was 4. And I was small for 4. I wasn't even 40 pounds. And this was every body opening that they could figure out how to do it. They did it. And they didn't care if they left me a bloody mess, because if I started to bleed out, they just dumped me in the regen tank.
So they had 0% empathy. There was no resistance in them at all into doing.
I was not a human to them. I was something that they had created.
Like exactly like a lab rat, like the absolute kind of callousness and unconcern as scientists would treat a lab rat or something. Which is
scientists are kinder to lab rats because they handle them so that they're tame enough they can work with them. This was no consideration at all. And if a child went catatonic, because every time this happened, your mind had to choose, am I going to split or am I going to die? And if you didn't die, they would keep you around. But if your mind went catatonic, they couldn't fix that. Their technology could not repair that. They could not bring you back. And they didn't even bother to kill you. They just dumped you in the incinerator. Okay? It took 1.5 years to produce the number of alters they wanted.
And which was a large amount. I find this mind-boggling, the number of alters that they need to create in you, and I can't fit that in my model. Why they would need such an
They
astonishing.
had buyers for each of them. This was a money-making operation. This was child trafficking.
I get it now, or that gives me an insight into the maximal alters, because maximal.
There's a theory that Stuart Swerdlow put forward in his book 13 Cubed, and I found it resonated. But the theory is that our minds will, when we get past 4 or 5 of these, that our minds will automatically split into that 13 by 13 by 13 cubic hierarchical array, like a computer.
That's
a really interesting book if anybody ever wants to read it. He does brag about what he did at Montauk. No, I have memories of being at Montauk fall of 61 into spring of 62. That was the first Montauk project where they had the chair and they were trying to figure out how to use it. And they were also studying the butterfly effect. Basically, how much can we change in the past without screwing up our future? And I remember being part of that program. I've been finding the guys that were part of Project Phoenix, which was a separate program. I was not there with Al Bielek that I remember, but the program that Al Bielek and Preston Nichols ran, I found 12 of those guys, kids, I should say. They're now adults. Most of them are in their 40s. And it's men and women, which most people think it was just boys because that's what Stuart and Al and Preston all said. Oh, it's just boys. No, it's not. There were girls there too. And one of the rewards for the boys was to rape all the girls. This was what was going on.
And the girls turned out to have a very different sort of tendency when in the chair, right? Which obviously they would want to utilize for different programs.
Well,
why don't you explain that as for?
They had projects to change the timeline. One of the big things when the CIA took it over was they wanted to change who won World War II. Because first time through, Germany won, took over the world. That's the real history. Second time the CIA messed with it, they were still unable to conquer Neuschwabenland in Antarctica. And they have never been able to change the timeline enough to end that. So, yeah, Germany won World War II. Not Germany, the country, but the German people who were in Antarctica. Germany, the country, gave an unconditional surrender. And they were never given a peace treaty, so we could bomb Berlin right now and nobody would be able to do anything about it. That's why we have not had a declaration of war since, is because the one against Germany is still ongoing. But one of the things they did was in the Civil War, the South won.
Yeah, that's what I was actually just going to mention. I've heard stories like that. People who have memories, strange sort of memories of remembering that the South won.
Sort of I remember the South winning. And at the time that I was at Montauk that I remember, I was about 6 years old, and I remember at that point the South had won. Because that was part of my prep. They wanted me to steal an apple from a general store in 1880 something in the West. It was a dry desert looking area with lots of wind. And I was supposed to steal it and bring it back. And somebody else was going to take it back and put it back where we took it from, just to test what moving the apple would do to the timeline.
So moving an apple from a timeline can have some kind of consequence, some kind of rippling effect.
What they found in that project was there are key individuals who make a difference. And you cannot mess with those without messing with everything. Now, that key individual can be a butterfly, it can be a worm, it can be a person. And yes, I know Andy. I've interviewed him on my show. But the key individuals matter. The other people, things matter because they matter to the key individuals' lives. So it's not like other people don't matter. There are no...
They only matter insofar as they matter to the key individuals. That's a strange fact, that the system is like that. I can't understand why that would be, but
it's the way it works. And I didn't even try to make sense of it because it's felt wrong. But at the same time, I do understand everybody matters because you're using resources and you affect each other. No man is an island. But yet, one person affects the timeline and those around him don't. You can go through and kill the rest of them, and it won't necessarily affect the timeline at all. Now, I do not recommend going through and killing people. I want to make that clear. There's a new age thing going on out there about non-player characters, and I find that disgusting because
absolutely,
anytime you
a dangerous idea. Yeah. Yes,
anytime you dehumanize someone, you're setting them up to be genocided. And I have never seen a genocide I approved of.
Exactly. Same thing with people saying, there's a notion out there among some spiritual people that there's some people, that don't have a soul.
Same.
I can't adjudicate, whether this could be or couldn't be. I don't think it is the case, but even if it is, we don't want that idea spreading, because that
if it runs a meat suit, it has a soul. People need to accept that idea. It comes directly from real quantum mechanics. There is no place, no particle, no wave function that contains consciousness. Therefore, consciousness is a function of the wave system that creates matter. So it goes back to the ancient doctrine called pantheism, that the entire universe is sentient, and that it all contains God.
Yes.
And a lot of people have real problems with that. And I'm sorry, but that's where physics went. And that's what my experience in space was. You have not seen some of the life forms that are out there. Some of them are liquids that you can put in a bucket, and they defend their territory, and they speak telepathically, and some of them are smarter than we are. There's gases out there that are sentient and can actually form a solid body for a short period of time. they're classed as plasmoids.
Mm-hmm.
So there's stuff out there. But Langley was one of those places where they had a job to do. They were going to do it. They didn't care if they killed us or not, because if they did, they'd just dump us in the regen tank. They didn't care how many times they had to do what they did. Some of them seemed to enjoy it. Others, it was like, you're disgusting. And it's the stuff of nightmares. Now, why did I believe the memories when the agent activated them? Because for decades, I had dreams that I would wake up screaming of a little blonde girl crawling through the walls. Okay, that's what the dream was.
You in third person. You were seeing you in third person.
I was dissociated from myself and seeing me in third person. The real event, the real memory was they had a hole carved in the wall, and they'd shove me in it and nail the cardboard over it and leave me to suffocate. That was the real memory.
Yeah.
So when you're going through people's memories, your subconscious is going to use symbols. And what you see in those dreams may not be what really happened. And that's important for some of these people out there. You have to go through each and every bit of it. And I do self-hypnosis. And I do this thing where I ask my subconscious to just open the curtains and show me what really happened. Don't delete the cover memory, because it has value of its own, because it tells me how my subconscious works. But open the curtains and show me what really happened.
Interesting.
I had dreams every Friday for 40 years that I was a mermaid in a kelp bed, because that was my cover memory for when they were abducting me.
Oh, goodness. I see. Yeah. So just to, in case the audience is lost at all, so they abducted you. They're putting you through mind control programming. They're fracturing the mind and creating alters, which are then being programmed.
It's trauma-based mind control, and it's an ancient Illuminati bloodline family method.
Yes, it goes way back.
It goes back to Samaria.
That's right. Yeah,
at least 5,000 years.
Yeah. And what I think is remarkable about your particular experiences with this is that they were killing you. You can tell them about the Daisy Jane game where they would just outright kill you and then bring you back.
Yeah,
oh, I'm sorry.
They'd hand you a flower. Flowers have those daisies have an odd number of flowers. I mean petals, and you pull. Loves me, not. Loves me, not. If it was loves me, you got to live. If it was loves me not, you got shot, and you woke up in the regen tank.
Right. So
this was serious terrorization of small children
on a level that I didn't even think was possible before, because when you think about torture, like torture can be horrendous, but there's always, like, if one has ever contemplated this before, there's always the thought, like, if I ever had to go through torture, you could probably do it, you just got to get to the point of death, and then you're free. And that's kind of like the consolation that is probably in the minds of most people who go through torture, that death is an escape, that you think
death is not an escape, because they'll put
not from these people.
They'll dump you back into the regen tank and make you do it.
And so to me, that fundamentally changes everything about the nature of that torture, and is on another level entirely than
we were trained to kill even our best friends. they would trauma bond us with another individual and then make us kill that person. And they'd be back the next day out of the regen tank. So psychologically, you thought death wasn't real.
Yeah. Wow. That's just, the implications of that are profound. As far as it disturbs me that can happen in the universe, in the, you know, what we think is a loving universe fundamentally.
This was 1959 to 1964. They were doing this. This isn't a new thing. I'm 69 years old. This is not new at all. So I'm second generation of these programs. I don't know if you know Misha Johnston, but she was first generation of these. She was in the Monarch program, and she's written a book about it. These monarchs weren't butterflies, I think is what she called it. But yeah, she and I are good friends because we're first and second generation of this mess. When they have that many alters to work with, they train them for different things. And then I've been in the process of reintegrating my partner I live with. We've been living together. It'll be 24 years in May. And he's an Iroquois shaman. And we have been using shamanic soul fragment retrieval to reintegrate my alters.
Okay. And that's that works.
That works. You still have to do the merge. You still have to do the shadow work. So it's not like you become one person, but you share memory.
What's the name of that modality again?
Shamanic soul fragment retrieval.
Okay.
And it has to be a real shaman, not one of these people that took a weekend course. Somebody who's really trained, and don't go into a native reservation and start asking who the shaman is. Oh my God, that's rude. You know.
Hey Penny, how were these altars created? Do you know? Was it like through drugs or hypnosis or something else? How do they create these altars?
Through the trauma.
Okay.
That's what the rape is about.
Okay.
What happens? Okay, this is the best explanation I can come up with. When a child experiences a trauma, they choose whether they're going to live or not. And if they're going to live, they form a bubble around that memory. And they don't remember it anymore. And depending on how much energy they put into that bubble, it can become another personality. That's why they do so much of the trauma. Why they do so much of the torture is because not every bubble will form an altar. So they have to have lots of them. And they're trying to make 2,200 of them. So,
and that was going to bring me to my next question was, did any of your original personality remain intact? Or was you completely, disassociated?
I don't know. I think my Earth personality that was brought back, I think that's the real me. But I'm not sure. But that's the me who went through, school at the labor camp school with the kids that were here to. We had a Braceros program in California where Mexicans were allowed to come across. They were given temporary visas to come harvest crops. And they brought their whole families, and the kids would work in the fields too. And once the crops were harvested, they were put into California schools. Well, in fourth grade, I had a teacher that taught class in Spanish and English. He would give the lesson in Spanish and then give it in English. You know, this is the way I grew up. Junior high, they figured out I was smarter than the rest, and they put me in the advanced classes. By high school, I was fast-tracked for university courses. I got a full scholarship to go to Cornell University, and my dad ripped it up in front of me. He said, girls need husbands, they don't need degrees. That was in 1973. So yeah, there was a lot packed to keep me private and controlled, so I would never remember any of this. And then the NSA decided to activate me in 2013, and I have no idea why.
I know, that's the $1,000,000 question.
Yeah.
Well, that seems consistent with, you know, all of these sort of efforts, like with Randy Kramer's unit. You know, he was told to leak that information. Like, it seems like there's some kind of disclosure agenda, but for what aims, and we really don't know, to sort of leak stuff out intentionally about the programs. But why? I don't think we really know for sure exactly what they're.
I have no idea. The two men that I met stayed friends with me after they activated me. The agent, he would come and go, but he would talk to me. His boss spent 2 years teaching me how to be a dissident without being arrested. I mean, 2 years to teach me all of the laws, what I had to do to stay out of jail. And both of them were killed when I went public. I only went public when I did because my partner Lou and I were both being shot with dew. Now, I'm not talking about the big dew on the jet planes that are starting fires. No, I'm not talking about those. I'm talking about the dew that they use for crowd control in riots. And it burns you from the inside out. It takes 6 weeks to heal, and they were hitting me every 3 weeks. And they got Lou the first 2 times. And Lou's a shaman. He's a nice guy. He didn't need that. And so the third time I'm looking at him and I'm going, you know, Bill Cooper said if you know they're going to kill you, to hide in the spotlight. And he says, I agree. Let's go public.
Now, Penny, do you know what triggered the NSA to activate your first altar back in 2013?
No, I have no clue. I do know that the agent acted like he expected to see that altar. Instead, he activated the memories of that altar. Well, I couldn't understand the German. I took German in high school and college back in the day, but that was in the 70s. Come on. And this was a dialect. It's Schwabish. It's not Berlin German.
And when your memories resurfaced, did they come back all at once, or was it slow?
It was a big lump.
Okay.
With the nastiest stuff on the top.
And you also said that your memories that you have were in German. Why do you think that was?
Because I served with the Germans.
So that was...
Once I was out of Langley, we were taken to Long Island, New York, and there's a building there, and no, it's not the Empire State Building, and it's under a bridge. I see it clearly. It's this building. It's several stories, but it's not real tall. It's not a skyscraper, but it's right under a bridge. And we come in the front door, and there's this whole bank of elevators. And one of them, you go in it and it has two control panels. One of them is as an elevator, and the other one is as a wormhole, and it takes you to Mars. Or at least they said it was Mars. And you get out at the other end, and there's this like a hotel desk, and there's this cranky old woman that ended up calling somebody to come get us. And there's this big sign that says "Willkommen in Mars." And from that point forward, that whole loop, I was speaking German.
So let's go into that for our next half. So you arrive at Mars, or what we think is Mars. We really don't know, how many layers of deception there could be.
Well, the artwork that Tony Rodriguez had done of where he was taken to matches.
It does.
It does. When I saw that, it was like, oh yeah, you've been there.
It does seem like some of the creatures that you had encountered also matched up with Tony.
So was that like Aries Prima?
Aries Prima.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay.
And Aries Prima had been a Alpha Drac base, and it was built for Alpha Dracs, and we had to create human-sized rooms inside that.
And that was the first thing you noticed, right, when you were walking in, that everywhere was kind of big and didn't seem like
big.
What else was odd about the art? Was there anything else noteworthy about the architecture that was different other than the scale of it?
I was inside it, not so much outside it. I didn't see the outside of the buildings.
Yeah.
So I don't know what the architecture was like.
I was going to ask, what was the landscape like in the atmosphere?
We were inside a mountain, basically, or I don't know if it was a mountain or if we were underground. Okay. But all of the real settlements on Mars are underground because the sandstorms circle the planet. And they build up such static electricity that they are basically like an EM pulse, and they fry your electronics on the surface.
So that's why everything's underground. I'd always hypothesized that it must be the radiation, the thin atmosphere or lack of.
Well, that's another reason, but the glass that they put glass domes over craters on other planets. And that keeps the radiation out, but it doesn't stop the EM pulse. And I'm not sure why, but it doesn't.
These electrical storms are significant and sometimes get so large that the lightning will reach the whole way to Phobos, I guess.
Oh yeah, it rings Phobos like a bell. Both of the Martian moons are constructed. That's probably important information.
Now, besides humans, Penny, were there any, how do I want to say it? Were there any other species there that you're aware of?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I don't remember the same ones that Andy does. I think we were in different places.
Andy Bashago or who?
Andy Bashago. Okay. I had him on my show after Doris verified me because he didn't remember Germans being there. I remembered CIA being there. So I had been ordered to stay away from them. But, okay, I remember Mars humans. They are us. We have been separated since whatever took the Martian atmosphere, but genetically they are us. So
really? So we're talking about a native species of humans.
A native species of human on Mars. They resemble The ones I saw resembled Apache, but they have an orange cast to their skin. And we thought that was diet related because we really don't know what they eat, because as soon as we would come to their area, they would pack up and leave.
Were they
So
kind of like nomad? Were they primitive type humans, or did they have tech, or?
they were a very spiritual race. They worshipped a mother goddess, and because of that, they held their women in high regard. And the women would go around topless because the breasts were the source of food for babies, and they were worshiping that. And as soon as the Americans and the Germans showed up, they started raping them. And so that entire group wants absolutely nothing to do with us, and I can't say that I blame them.
So what was their level of civilizational development? Did they seem to be on at the same level of technology as Native Americans in our country, or did they have some tech, or?
They could weave clothing. I don't know out of what. They could grow food underground. I don't know what they grew. I know that they built underground cities that looked like apartments, and that the doorway to this underground city would have a skull, not an actual skull, but a carved skull. That so when you see those carved skulls with a roof out in the middle of nowhere on Mars, there's a town under that. And
so, Penny, did they have their own resources that they created? Were things imported from maybe Earth, or was it sourced locally?
The Mars natives,
Yeah.
they had their own stuff. They were completely isolated when the Germans and then the Americans showed up.
Okay, all right. Thank
you. Now, they had their own thing. Now, there's a city underground that in the southern hemisphere that has 10 million Anunnaki, or as we call them here, tall whites. There was a Draco base. I think it had 500,000 Draconians in it, most of whom were not military. They were families. There were the Germans and the Americans. The Raptors. The Raptors were basically the same as the underground raptors that we have on Earth, except the ones on Earth have gone completely animal, and the ones on Mars, whatever took the atmosphere took their technology, and they were just starting to come back Neolithic whenever the Germans started bombing their cities. Okay, when you get into space, every square centimeter is owned by somebody else already. The only way...
I feel like that's universally true, not just on Mars, but other colonies in our solar system, other locations, moons.
Everywhere is owned. And you have to negotiate a lease or declare war and take it as spoils. That's the way it's done. And so we got there under... the Germans got there under a lease from the Draconians. They were the only ones who would give them a lease, and the terms were atrocious. The Germans had to surrender actual human beings to be food for the Draco. That's how they paid for the space for their colonies. Now, I want you to think about that. Why were they willing to do that to get off Earth? Think about that after they had won a war. So, yeah. But the raptors on Mars are 8 to 9 feet tall. They look just like the raptors in Jurassic Park, the movie, except they have a feather or two coming off the back of their head.
They do. Now, do they stand upright? Do they have an opposable thumb, or how can they be able to utilize?
They have 3 claws and an opposable thumb. The 3 claws have big claws, and they're like 6 to 8 inches long, and they're sharp as razor blades. And in an unarmed fight, they will win every time.
Now, these are the same reptilians that Randy Kramer describes, and the same species that you originally referred to, let's say in your James Rink interview, as the green reptilians. Is that the raptors?
Yeah,
they're all the same?
They're green on one hemisphere and brown on the other. So there's 2 variations. But yeah, we actually called them Lizzies. Just like any other military.
There was no formal. The Germans didn't have a formal name for them.
No, not that I remember.
Mm-hmm.
Not that I can remember. They just called them Lizzies. And my understanding from Randy is that the U.S. military in space has decided to exterminate them because when we go through our dark age, that humans always do, that they will exterminate the humanity there. So they're going to exterminate the raptors first. Now, these are...
They will exterminate the humanity on Mars or on Earth?
They will exterminate the humanity on Mars.
Okay.
There were 10 million Germans on Mars when I left in 1990.
Now, how long was you there on Mars before
25 years.
Before you started military training?
I was put into Schule right away. Schule is German school. There were only 20 plus, I don't remember exactly how many, but it was about 20 of us that came. We didn't read or write any language. We barely spoke English. We were so traumatized. And the Germans don't want ignorant people in their military. That's just like, they want people who can think on their feet. So they put us through Schule.
10 years. That's a lot. It's a long time, to prepare you.
When you come out, you have the equivalent of a BA and your military training along with it. When I graduated, I was put into a fighter plane.
Did you receive any kind of like augmentation or enhancements?
Yes.
Either biological or technological?
I had a Neuralink chip put in my brain, and the outer part of it resembled a Bluetooth behind my left ear. And I had another chip. You remember those circular things that they had on 7 of 9 in Voyager?
I'm not sure.
I didn't watch
it. Was one of those on the other side of my head, on the forehead, and it was linked into my visuals. And so I would see a readout that would give me airspeed, temperature, air thickness, which is a big deal on Mars. And if I saw a person or other species, it would identify who they were, which side they were on, what faction they were with, whether they were friend or foe. And if they were foe, they would have this bright red thing bouncing around them.
Interesting. So this was this when you were a pilot, or was this if you were on foot as well and saw somebody on the ground, or was
this was standard operating procedure
all the time?
All the time.
Mm-hmm.
And
presumably everybody had this kind of.
Everybody had something similar. I was linked to my assigned ship, and I was in a unit that they called the Valkyries. Valkyren. I have to think about how to say that one.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, is that what led up to, and I'm probably going to destroy this, but is that what led up to years later the Nacht Waffen? Is that how you say that?
Nacht Waffen is okay. It was like 2015, 2016, and I was hearing all this dark fleet, and I'm going, wait a minute, the Germans wouldn't be calling themselves something in English, and they wouldn't be calling themselves Dark Fleet, So I went into meditation and said, okay, what do I remember them calling it? Nacht Waffen. Luftwaffe was air fleet, literally air weapon.
Mm-hmm.
Nacht Waffen is night weapons, plural, because it's multiple fleets. Each colony has its own. And it's a poetic way of saying space fleet. And, people don't believe me that the Germans are a very poetic people, but they came up with these epic poems. The Eddas came from Germanic people. Come on. So
when was you transferred to Nacht Waffen?
I was transferred in 1990 because I was in a de facto marriage, and I was sent to take out a raptor nest. And my honey was being eaten alive. And I panicked. And because of the Neuralink chip, my ship decided that meant fire all weapons. And the military on Mars, Marsische Heimschild, decided that I was no longer trustworthy with those weapons. And so they transferred me to the space military.
So that wasn't Nacht Waffen when you were a fighter pilot.
No.
And just to get into the details a little bit on, you were flying something that was similar to an Earth aircraft, but which wasn't the standard propulsion, though. It wasn't conventional propulsion.
No,
it was
conventional propulsion
with electrogravitic type propulsion, or
it was plasma.
Okay.
Plasma engines.
And Jim, thanks for clarifying that too, because I got a little confused and wasn't sure when that all started. But you said that she was on Mars as well. She was
I was a fighter pilot on Mars. I flew air support for Randy Kramer's bunch. I never interacted with them personally, but I flew air support for them. That was one of my jobs. My main job was to pick up dead human remains, so bring them back to the base so that they could be regenerated, so we would have our people back, because we had really high casualties. And I would say probably half of the people that I brought back turned out to be the native Mars humans. And that's how we knew they were us, was because the computer couldn't tell the difference from just the dead bodies.
Wow, that's interesting.
So
so that was one of your main tasks to
that was one of my main jobs.
You would land. They'd send you to an area, some coordinates, and you'd land the ship.
The ship
and would you have a crew that got out?
The ship would scan the area and tell me where the remains were. And because of the chip, it was telling me while I was walking to them, and each one would be in its own body bag.
Now, how did they die?
Fighting with raptors.
Okay.
Or being eaten by spiders, or the ant people. Mars is crawling with reptiles and insects, or at least the part of it where I was. Andy talks about other life forms that I don't remember seeing. But when Doris and I went through my memories compared to her file, there were several things that I don't remember. So I don't know why not. But she said that there was a reference to fly people, and I just flat don't remember them. So, but yeah, it turned out that the guy I was in a de facto marriage with was the same person as the NSA agent who activated my memories. And that created lots of problems in my life. Lots of problems. But that's something I'd rather keep a little more private.
Yeah, no, that's okay. That's fine.
But both of the agent and his boss were killed when I went forward, when I came public. One had air bubble shot into his heart while he was in the hospital, and the other one was hit with the ice gun that they talked about in the church committee hearings in the Senate in 1975. They're still using those weapons. So both of them were killed because I went public. Doris tried to tell me that it wasn't because of me, that it was because of things they were doing, but I can't get rid of that guilt feeling.
Now, when you joined Nacht Waffen, how did your role change from being a pilot on Mars?
I was a prisoner because I was chipped into the quantum computer of that ship. They changed the outer chip that connected me to the technology. And so I was an open door into their computer. So I was a prisoner. I could go from the bridge to navigation, my barracks, officer's mess, because I was a lieutenant, and the hallways in between. And that was it. Now, all of this is just one Alter's one trip. I have 90 Alters out there right now transporting survivors of an exploded planet to places in the Oort cloud, and we travel through the sun to get there. The sun's a portal. And when we come out, the military-industrial complex is sitting there waiting for us, hoping to pick us off so that they can take our refugees and turn them into cyborgs.
Which would bring me to this one. Was there ever resistance among human personnel, or was everyone compliant due to programming?
You had a chip in your head that would kill you if you opposed them.
So there was no way that nobody could get away from that technology then.
You even think about Earth, and they would knock you to your knees and give you epileptic seizure.
Oh, wow.
And it was very important that for some reason or other, it isn't exactly clear to me why. I guess one could make the argument for control purposes. They don't want, I think you've said this, they don't want you to think that there's anywhere else to go other than where you are,
Yeah.
that there's no refuge. And so they also...
That's all of the programs out there, not just the Germans. All
yeah,
of them are like that.
yeah.
That's something people need to understand, because they'll hear people talking about the Alliance. The Alliance chips people too. And they have been known to kill people, take out all of the implants that the Germans have put in, implant their own, and then revive you.
So, Penny, let me ask this question. If you, let's say, thought about escaping, and they would kill you.
Escape where?
From you know.
No, escape to where?
Oh, well, I'm not sure, but let's just say,
There's
for
no place
example,
to go.
that somebody
Like I
thought,
said, everything belongs to somebody else. There's no place you can go.
okay,
And
but
you're
let's
chipped,
just,
and they can track you by the frequencies of your organs.
well, what we was just talking about, if somebody would try to resist, if someone would try to resist, if they would kill you and put you in a regen tank, when you come back,
you try to resist, you get spaced.
and this is what I'm trying to figure out.
They kill you dead and leave you there.
Okay. Because I wasn't sure, because you talked about the regen tanks, and I was curious.
The regen tanks are for if you're injured on duty, or you catch a bug on a planet, or God forbid somebody try to take over the ship and you have to do hand-to-hand combat. And yes, I have had to. You know.
That makes
no, we don't. No, we don't use guns on ships. We use laser swords. Short. They're about a half-meter long. Where's my camera? There. They're about a half-meter long, and they're red. And it comes out of a silver handle that just fits my hand. And it's a little bit short for some of the guys. And yeah, if you want to take somebody out, you do laser sword in the ship, because if you fire a firearm, the projectile will go through the wall and you will lose your atmosphere, and that's not a good place to be.
Yeah, and thank you for clarifying what I was asking, because I got a little confused there. So I figured if you explain it to me,
if you are resisting, you get spaced. Now, I had one commanding officer, and his alter here on Earth is a really nice guy, and I really like him a lot, and I want to make that really clear. But his alter out there he was sexually harassing me day in and day out, and he was really nasty because he saw me interacting with Draco, and he was one of those people that hated Draco. And he was just giving me a hard time every day. And I kept saying, no, I don't want to. No, I don't want to. No, I'm not interested. Go bother somebody else. And he finally assigned me to service 4 of the worst perverts on the ship.
Oh, wow.
Which was an illegal order. And he watched me turn several shades of green. And I finally decided I'd had enough. And I focused on, it's in biology, it's called the third ventricle. It's the space in the center of your brain where your pineal gland is surrounded by cerebrospinal fluid. I focused on that, and I heated it up, and I exploded his skull.
Wow.
And then I picked him up and I put him in regen, because my intention was not to kill him. My intention was to make him leave me alone.
Now, Penny, when you put him in regen, when he comes out, does he have memory of that?
Oh, yeah.
Does he? Okay.
And he was pissed.
So he has to relive that.
Yes.
Okay, all right.
And his solution was to tie a rope around me and space me and bring me back in and pop me into regen and space me again for 8 solid months.
Wow.
8 solid months this person did that, because that's, to me, that suggests a kind of psychopathy that I didn't think was a thing. So he was not satisfied after spacing you once, and he went on and did this regularly for 8 months. Like, you have no recall of this.
I have full recall of this.
So that just goes to tell you about there are psychologies out there like that in the programs that are extreme psychopaths, like well beyond maybe even what we're used to on Earth.
And one day he decided he was tired of the Alliance bothering us all the time. And so he came to Earth, and we were in Earth orbit, and we were part of an armada of 20 ships, and we had nukes. And he tried to nuke DC to stop the Alliance. And I stopped him. And because we were sitting there in space near Earth orbit, we got captured by the Alliance. And all of the officers were put into these cages, and mine had a psi dampening field, which took my abilities away from me. And I was naked with a straitjacket. And my jailer, who I know who he was, but he claims it didn't happen, so I'm not going to name him. I've confronted him with the memory. But he would come in with a baseball bat and just beat me to a bloody pulp and just leave me there. And after about 5 days of this, there's an interdimensional that has taken a fondness to me, and she's a fire elemental, and she came and freed all of us and popped all the officers back onto the ships except for him. And he said he didn't want to go back. We said, fine, have fun. And we left, and one of the ships was Draconians, and I filed reports with both Oberkommando, the Germans, and with the Draconian Queen Mother, and they decided between them that they were going to put me in charge. And I have heard from other members of the crew that some of the officers wanted to kill me because I stopped the nuke. And others thought that I was a hero, and that the ship is back on regulations instead of being run like a pirate ship. And the mission is going forward as it was meant to. So I'm not saying I'm a great leader, but at least I got us back on task. But that mission is ongoing. That was a 60 and back that started in 2018. That's one of the ones I'm still out there.
So an aspect of your consciousness in another cloned body?
Nope.
Or
the Germans don't use clones. The Americans use clones. The Germans use your natural body. You are out there and you come back. They don't kill you. They put you in the regen tank. They set it for an age
regress.
They age regress you, and they put you back where they got you.
So there's two different methods, okay? As I was always confused as to which was it. Some people feel that they're age regressing the bodies, back to.
The Germans age regress your bodies. The Americans pop you into a clone, and they kill the clone to send you home.
Interesting. So yeah, so both things are true.
Yeah, I told you they use different technologies, complete total systems.
Yeah.
So when you're listening to people,
different technology trees.
Yeah, when you're listening to people, it's really important where they served. If they served with the Americans, you're going to have them in a clone body. They're going to do a 20 and back. They might be at the 20-year mark. They might be re-upped and put into another clone for another 20 years. That's how the Americans are handling it. With the Germans, they take you for 20 years, 40 years, 50 years, whatever, depending on how strong your genetics will allow it. What's the difference between regen and cloning? There are times that there's not a whole lot of a difference. I'll grant you that. If I bring back a finger and we regen you, there's not a whole lot of difference between that and a clone.
Seriously. And I was just going to ask that too. I was going to ask.
The person in your comments asked that.
Yes. But I was going to ask you about age regression and cloning and what the difference is when you come back.
Those of us who have done more than one trip end up with something that we are calling age regression sickness. And it's very similar to fibromyalgia. Very similar. And I have had a couple of groups of SSP folks, experiencers, and we've done polls and to find out, is this a thing among us, or is this just something that we're surmising? It's an attempt at coming closer to scientific evidence, and the general public has 5% fibromyalgia at this time. Our groups have 25%. So this is a serious problem. And if you've been out for 20 years, so we count it 20 years from the time you remember first being taken. That's when it hits. So there's something about that 20-year mark that they don't want us to survive. And they make us sicker and sicker and sicker and sicker. And that's what's going on with me. And I had a husband who was a handler who poisoned me on purpose because he didn't want me to ever, he had told me that he had been trained as a telepath by the CIA, and we were married about 4 years when he started poisoning me. So I know that from the symptoms, and because when I left him, I had heavy metals test, and it came back heavily positive for arsenic because he was dipping ant-8 steaks in my coffee. So how much of mine is age regression and how much of mine is the arsenic? I don't know. But I have a lot of people tell me, well, you can rise above that. Come on, guys. I'm 69. I have survived so many things. I've been dead 10 times here, plus whatever I've done on all these trips. I remember 91 60 and backs. how old does that make me? Because those were with the Germans in this body. You know, I think I'm entitled to get old. I know that probably sounds weird to people in their 30s and 40s, but I'm tired.
Well, if ever there was a person justified to be tired, I think someone who's done 91, 60 and backs would be it.
Yes.
Before we close out, I wanted to get to. I just have some questions about some of the ET species and what you know about them.
Well, I'll start off with I have never seen a Pleiadian.
And
Not
doubt that they are a thing, or
and the ones that I have seen who called themselves Pleiadians were rogue Germans from the breakaway. And if you look at all of the books written by the people who encountered them, these Pleiadians speak German. They have swastikas in their ship. They fly something that resembles a Hanabu every time.
And in your experience, like your tours of duty and the positions that you were in, you would have come into contact, or you would have been privy to that knowledge if they did exist, you think? Or do you think it's possible that just given the enormity of all of the races, doing various things out there, that you could just not have interacted with any, and they may exist? Or do you feel confident that they don't exist?
I was the one who flew the ship. I knew where we were going. I may not have interacted with the people when we got there, but I knew where we were going, and we never went into the Pleiades. Never. We went to Sirius. We went to Lyra. We went to Vega. We went to Draconis. We went to every place that we were assigned to go to whenever there was a world that decided they wanted to stop paying taxes to the Draco, because we were the last resort to get them to change their minds. And before we were there, the Draconians would have spent 10 to 30 years trying to get these people to change their minds. And yeah, they're kind of a mafia, but at the same time, it's bad for business to kill the customers. So what they did was they would send us into space. Now, that one commanding officer wouldn't even talk to him. He would just blow the place up. Other commanding officers tried to talk to him, get him to listen to reason, maybe blow up a few cities. And we blow them up by dropping space rocks on them. Okay.
I think Jason Rice said something like that. If Jason Rice is even legitimate or not, I think that
Jason Rice, I believe, was telling the truth as he knew it. And he did say that his story about the history of the Germans on Mars had come from a German officer who basically gave him an overview. And that's why his story doesn't always agree with mine. Because I lived it, he didn't. He heard it from an officer. And that's one of the issues I have with folks who are they have no memories, and they're talking based on what a psychic told them, is because that psychic didn't live it and is filtering it through their own prejudices and understandings. Yeah. And those of us who have lived it, there's probably 30 of us that are public.
Yeah, I do not think people getting things from psychics. I don't think that's a good instrument of knowing with respect to these things. Getting back to the humanoid species, though, is there a greater human species? Is there a greater human species out there in the cosmos that we are a derivation from? Are there human-looking species that are taller, that fit the description of Pleiadians, or so you've been to Ceres and you've been to Lyra. Those are
The
two of
Anunnaki fit the bill, and their blue-collar caste, because they have a caste system. The Anunnaki blue-collar people, we call them tall whites. And they match the description of Pleiadians.
But yet the description of Charles Hall was a little bit different than how some people describe. Charles Hall described them as paper white skin.
That's how I see the.
That's how you.
Okay. That's how the ones I interacted with were the ones with paper white skin, clear or very pale blonde hair, bunny eyes. They fluoresce their emotions like squid and octopi.
What do you mean by that?
Their skin will give off, it's an iridescence. It's like your background. I was looking where your background is doing that green thing through it. The Anunnaki give off a fluorescent that gives their mood.
Interesting. Yeah. So Charles Hall thought that they had some kind of clothing on that had some kind of iridescence on it, but you think
that's their skin.
The being itself, that's their skin. Yeah, and you hear this a lot. I know in the abduction field, you hear this a lot with certain beings that have a kind of luminescence to them, and usually people regard that as maybe an indicator that it's a being of a higher spiritual level, and they radiate.
Anunnaki are not higher spiritual level. They are 3D physical beings who are, I'd say, probably 1,000 years ahead of us. That's it. They are no more spiritual than we are. They're just really good at pretending to be gods because they have psychic abilities.
Yeah.
And trust me, if they decide to talk to you in your head, you're going to hear them, and you're not going to be able to hear yourself think. And you will do anything they say to make them shut up.
Yeah, that's certainly evinced by Charles Hall's testimony. They seem to have no regard for other lower species, if we can call them that, non-human species.
The tall whites were the ones that are in Nevada, were on a mining colony, and their DNA was damaged.
Oh, okay.
And they don't. I heard that from the tall white Anunnaki on Mars, that the ones here are from a mining colony, and they were abandoned as low caste, and there was a war where the Draconians came in to take it, and they fought back, and they were hit with some of the higher level weapons the Draconians have, and it ended up where they don't have a very good functioning immune system. So if one of us touches them, we're bug factories, and if you accidentally scratch their skin, it takes them months to a year to heal.
That was what Charles Hall said, and they found our ability to heal remarkable in that regard.
Yeah.
That was the one thing that they were amazed by, that we could heal so quickly. And
but it was because they had survived this energy war with the Draconians.
Interesting.
And their DNA was damaged, and that's part of why they're here. Is they want to figure out how we're different. Now, we are Anunnaki hybrids. The Anunnaki are who created us from Homo erectus.
Now, Anunnaki is synonymous with tall white, or is Anunnaki encompass more species than the tall white? I'm always confused about that.
Okay. There were, I think it was 22 species that were here at the same time, and the resulting humans called them all Anunnaki. The particular species A.R. Borden calls Sams or Shahami. Those are the ones who created us, and we do resemble them. We don't. The darker skin colors came from the Homo erectus side. The you know, you've seen gingers that had white skin. I mean, white skin, like paper white.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we are a blending of Jahami with Homo erectus, and we do the ones who have a higher proportion of Jahami have psychic abilities, and that's why they're targeting the people who were the royals.
Does this correspond with people who have Rh negative?
Yes. Not entirely. It's not an exact, because there are a lot of people like me who carry a hidden Rh negative. My mama was negative. My dad's mama was negative. I have a hidden negative.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm in the 50s. The CRISPR tech only worked if mama was Rh negative, was O negative, and baby was O positive. And in the literature, they refer to that as indestructible, because the DNA of the Rh negative is supposed to kill an Rh positive child, and it didn't. Now, they do have technology to change your blood type. And I do believe that they changed the blood type of the kids that they were CRISPRing. But it's a coincidence, I guess. My original shot record said that my blood type was A negative. And when I did my Eldon card, it was O positive. And I did it myself because the doctor's office came up with B positive. So, you know.
Yeah. One more thing I have to ask you about. I have a personal interest in this. Is there, in fact, it seemed like you were alluding earlier that there is there a native Terran reptilian species that is not the Alpha Draconis, but a species of reptilian that evolved naturally from the dinosaurs, or rather like a saurian species? Is there a sentient saurian species that exists on Earth to this day? Tell me everything you know about that. What do you know?
There are figurines of them in the Ubaid collection. Let me see. Let me see if I can pull that up and show it to you.
Yes, absolutely. Go ahead and grant her permission, Todd, if you can.
Yes.
Yeah, I ran across them a while back, and they absolutely, the photos matched with what they talked about with the Lacerda files. I guess that's what you're talking about.
Yes, that's what I think. I'm interested in whether there's any validity to Lacerda in that species.
Don't let it lose that. I have enough trouble with cameras already. Okay. It's Can you see it?
Yes,
Okay,
I
yeah,
just added it.
I have seen
That's
yes.
from the Ubaid collection, and that is exactly how Lacerta described her people. That they have breasts, they have live births, they breastfeed, they are still reptilian, they have long pointy noses, and they have hair, black curly hair on their heads. That's exactly how she described them.
Yeah, so you can independently verify that that wasn't disinfo. There is a species like this that exists, a subterranean species,
Yes,
unrelated to.
and they have a psionic ability that they can put a mental picture in your mind to make you see them however they want you to.
Right.
So
Yeah.
they can pass amongst us freely.
And probably do.
Oh, yeah. Why wouldn't they?
So they're unrelated to, you mentioned earlier that there's a derivation of the raptors on Mars that are on Earth, but they've lost their sentience, that they're just animalistic. These are not that?
They live in deep, no, they're not this. Those live in deep caves. But yeah, these are real. And there were 7 underground species, beings that came from, they built up a culture, and then we would have our cyclic destruction cycle. And they would go underground. And we didn't know about them until the American government started going underground, knowing that the destruction cycle is coming. So that's part of the push why they're building these domes. The mantis insectoids, we have bugs everywhere. And some of the bugs are really smart. And if you read Starship Troopers, that's a pretty accurate description of the Mantid Empire. Ender's Game is not too far off either. There are several bug empires out there. The insectoids have hive minds, and they're
in this solar system.
Yeah, not the empires. The empires are outside the solar system. They're also in the Orion Spur. You can look that up on a galactic map. The ant people, if you knew the name in Hopi, it's Anunnaki. Does that sound familiar?
That does ring a bell.
Yeah. So, yeah. But there are insectoid races, and it's hard to describe the mummies that were found in Peru, what they would have looked like alive, because we're just seeing mummies that have been covered with plaster. But yeah, there are lots of things that have been here in the past. There are lots of things that will be here in the future if we don't nuke the place. And time travel is a real thing. If you have hyperspace drive, you have time travel. And it's not limited. You step into that hyperspace stream and you can step out whenever, wherever you want. Some of them take longer to get there.
What does it look like? Going back to your, real quick, I just have to ask you about this. When you were in the Montauk chair, you were in hyperspace in that stream. What is the experience of that? What does it look like? I mean, when you say step into, you can step onto the bank essentially at any point in time. are you actually stepping, or are you floating, or what? Could you just give us any more detail as to what
There's a
it's
flow
exactly
to it.
like? So you're
There
kind of
is a
flowing along.
natural flow to it. And the folks who run the galaxy, and I know them as the Galactic Authority, they have requested that we not build new streams, that we use the old ones, because they do leave holes in the fabric of space-time. But there's a flow to it, and it moves. Okay, you're too young to have seen the Time Tunnel TV show, but
Mhm.
it had stripes until it turned on, and then it was these wigglies.
Hmm.
That's what it's like. They had it nailed in the graphics for that show. That's exactly what it's
Really?
like. And
The
you,
lines, wiggling lines, kind of bright
yeah,
lines.
they're bright. And if you keep your eyes on where you're going, you will go there. But if you get distracted by one of those loops, you can be lost in all that forever.
Jesus. So is this the same thing that Andrew Bashaga described as the Vortal tunnel that would open up? They would generate a field of with his
Yeah, it's the
equipment,
same thing.
with teleportation equip. They would generate a field of
Yeah,
radiant energy, and then your inertia moving through it would open up a Vortal tunnel. It's the
yeah,
same thing.
same thing. Same thing that they were using with the Montauk chair.
And he said that you couldn't breathe, and that they had to figure out a way to shorten the tunnel to the other side because you'd be asphyxiated by the time you
Yeah.
got through it.
Well, we go through in a ship, so
Okay.
we have our own air with us.
But in the Montauk case,
In the
were you?
Montauk case, yeah, they it seemed like it took forever, but it probably didn't, because I was still, it was Earth on both ends, so there was air through parts of it. But yeah, and I would get to where I was wanting to run away. I was tired
And
of
you
being
did run away
curious.
sometimes, yeah, and they would track
Yeah,
you down, or a reptilian or a
a,
turtle
a
species,
turtle.
turtle species would track you down.
The Draconian Empire is made up of 7 reptilian species, and the turtle men are one of them.
Oh, that's interesting.
And he was brown, and he was about 9 foot tall and very strong. And I was 6 and a little. And I was running away in the chair because I'd been strapped into it on a box. And I would run across this one hole in the ceiling and go through it. And I would end up in this place that had orcs.
That had what?
Orcs.
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 Like something that resembled the orcs from the Tolkien narrative.
Yeah. Except these were really nice people. They just looked bad. They were really nice people. And
Oh my.
they would bring me a cup of broth and a blanket because I was basically naked. And they wouldn't bring me in because they knew the turtle man was coming for me. But if I had gone without the chair, he probably wouldn't have been able to find me. But eventually,
The chair was strapped to you and you couldn't free yourself from the chair.
right. And so the guy that was running that version of Montauk was going to pop me into the incinerator because I was a problem child. And the turtle man stopped him. He said that that ability was worth more than all the others put together.
Because it was rare.
And he chipped me where I couldn't run away. So most of us have chips all over us.
And so when you would come out of the portal tunnel, the hyperspace, you just go to the edges of the tunnel onto the bank, if to use the stream analogy, and then all of a sudden you're there. You're in a forest. Did you just wind up somewhere random, or you're in like a forest or somewhere that doesn't even resemble? What were you in some really alien environments ever that were? How would you be sure to always arrive in an environment where there was oxygen and where there wasn't obstructions? I know there was some maybe psychic perception and
There's psychic
intuiting.
perception because I
Mhm.
can see here and there, and I avoid the obstacles. And that's part of why I'm a navigator, is because I can see.
Mhm.
I can see. And I can avoid the obstacles. And when we come out, I can link to each and every crew person and whatever passengers or whatever we're hauling, and make sure that they're not in the floor or the wall or the ceiling or any boxes or anything like that.
Like what happened with the Philadelphia experiment.
Exactly, because they were doing this kind of thing without a navigator. That's the navigator's main job, is to take you into hyperspace, bring you back, and nobody's in a physical object. And no two people are merged. And Tony even talks about that when he was down in cargo, that when they would come out, that he would feel dizzy for a few minutes, and he would be told to stand still for 10 minutes. That was so the navigator could do their job.
Interesting.
So we had to visualize them being whole and separate from everything around them.
Oh, so you almost had to kind of manifest it, manifest that reality.
Yeah.
Oh, so
It's a
that's different than
side
I thought.
ability. It's not something a computer can do by itself.
So when you're in hyperspace, everything's in flux, and you kind of have to solidify what's going to happen psychically before you
Yeah.
materialize wherever you're going.
The computer does the math part. We tell it where we're going, where and when we want to be there. And the computer does the math because of the orbits and other things. The navigator has to watch for objects that are not on the map, space rocks, ships, things that critters. There are whole classes of beings that have evolved to eat the plasma of space, and they like to stick to the ship. They like to travel in hyperspace. They like to be a pain in the butt.
Sentient beings that exist in the vacuum of space that float around.
Some of them are sentient. Some of them I'm not so sure about. This isn't a new concept. I think it was Star Trek Next Generation.
I think I recall something like that.
They had one where they had built a base, and it turned out that they had planted it on a space crater rather than a planet, and all those people had to be evacuated. But yeah, this is the kind of thing that's real. That's
crazy. That's just I would not have thought that seems too much like fiction, but I think that
most fiction has a basis in reality.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's just not believable.
Yeah.
But whenever you start comparing all of this to fiction, well, each fictional story only uses part of the truth.
Or Yeah, or watered down.
The reality is a lot more complex. It's a lot more interwoven. Uh, there are things on Earth that are interwoven into the secret space program, like child trafficking, like the sex trade, like a certain chemical that well, talking about this would get you off YouTube. It's a certain addictive chemical. Starts with an A. All of this is interwoven, and remember, they charge money for using my altars. As far as they are concerned, I'm like a truck. They will use me as many times as they can and get their money's worth.
That's what I'm starting to understand. Yeah, it's just it's a commodity, and they maximize the usefulness of that commodity.
And they don't give a damn that I think I'm human.
Say that again?
They don't give a damn that I think I'm human.
Yeah.
And yeah, I do think I'm a human. I think I'm a modified human, but I'm still human, and I still put the survival of the human species above almost everything else. You know, if it was between me and the end of humanity, see ya. Humanity is going to survive as an organic species as long as I have any will left in me. So all those people out there who think I'm a demon, they're getting me way wrong. I may have abilities, but I'm on your side.
So that's interesting that, you know, despite all of the, you know, genetic engineering and manipulation, you know, that your integrity and sort of moral compass survives despite all that. Or do they not want to eliminate that entirely, or can't they? Or
I don't think they can. I think that's soul level. Because I was sent here for this time period because humanity's existence is at stake. And that's my mission. I'm here to make sure we survive as a organic species, not a singularity species.
What a hell of a sojourn, though, to incarnate into a lifetime, to be taken and used in the way that you are with, you know, say 91, 60 and backs. Like, that's a fucking fucked up incarnation. That, I mean, if you're, the soul must be gung-ho to inject itself into a situation like that. That to me that seems like
wants humanity to survive, and she's in love with the Anthropos. What can I say? And this is the 10th iteration of the Anthropos, and all of the others have self-destructed at this stage.
The 10th civilization of human, the 10th human civilization on planet Earth. Is that what you're referring to?
The 10th human species that has been planted in this galaxy.
Okay. Wow, this is a complex story, and we have to have you back on at some point, because I feel like you are one of the most substantive and knowledgeable people out there. It truly seems like your knowledge base is limitless, and it's just...
there are things I don't know. I don't know why the NSA wanted to activate me. No.
Yeah, and that's what I also love about you. There's some people, I kind of feel like Randy Kramer is one of these, even though I believe Randy Kramer's story, who have an answer for everything, you know, and just, I don't know if it's, you know, some kind of psychology or thing where you just can't say you don't know to something. You are not like that. It can be so many things.
There's a lot I don't know, and there's a lot that I just have not been able to remember. And,
right. Are there some things, real quick question, that are inaccessible through regression? I'm always confused as to, you know, when some people do regressions and they try to figure out, what happened to them, during this 20 back or this abduction event, there seems to be blocks where you cannot, no matter what, access certain things. Do you think that there are sensitive things in your experience that they have extra protection against you unveiling and you can't get to them? And what might that be that you can't know or are allowed to know?
I have an altar with a Thelema seal on it.
And what is that?
Thelema is a secret society that does black magic. I do not know what is inside that altar. I do not know what it's used for, because every time it has come up, there's this big silver Thelema seal over it. I have no idea what that altar
So
has done. I can't access it. A couple of the people in the community who can read altars for you have told me I don't want to know. They won't even, they've seen it, they know what it is, they won't tell me.
Yeah, I don't know if I want to know either, because if all of this stuff, this deep secret space program type stuff, is accessible, all of these, which you would think would be the deepest, darkest secrets, the fact that the Germans sold out 150,000, humans to the Draco, for food, you think that would be one of the most sensitive things, but this indicates that there's another deeper layer of sensitivity, of secrecy that they cannot have out for whatever reason. And what the fuck is that?
Every time I have thought I've gotten to the bottom of all of this, the bottom will just drop out and there's a whole new layer. And I think this is layer 11. And by this point, things that I learned at the top layers, the first ones, they're technically true, but they're not actually true, because every layer has put a spin on it that changes the actual meaning of it. Some of the things that I thought were evil at first have turned out to not be, once you know all the facts. And the further I go, the more true that is. But one of the things that I think people should keep in mind, everybody out there says they're the good guys. Nobody says they're the bad guys. And we need to start paying attention to that, because if things are going the way I hope they will, we're going to be facing official first contact. And we need to filter what we're offered through what's good for us. And we're going to have to avoid the, oh my God, they're Pleiadians, we're going to worship them. I'll tell you, when I met the Shahami, the ones from Nibiru, it was the hardest thing for me to not kneel before them, because it was like it was hardwired into my brain to do that. And I was not going to give them the satisfaction. Yeah, I'm a defiant little bitch. But that was the hardest thing I have ever done, is stand before the king of Nibiru as an equal and force that idea on him, because he said I was nothing but a girl, Lulu.
Lulu.
That's a primitive worker. Primitive. Like we would think of a chimpanzee. Yeah. That's all he thought I was. And I stood there and demanded to be treated as an equal. And he couldn't handle it.
That sounds like a dangerous thing to do.
Well, he did try to kill me after that. Yes. I got rescued by the Germans and the Draconian Queen Mother. So I wouldn't recommend it to a normie.
Everybody keep that in mind.
Yes. And with that, Penny, I have to thank you so much for coming on. And as Jim said, you're going to have to come back on for a part 2 because your story is mind-blowing. I have thoroughly enjoyed listening to your experiences. It's incredible. And people, if somebody had something similar and they wanted to ask you about it, where do they got to go? I'm
on Facebook, and I don't answer those that say hi. I answer to those who say, I saw you on so and so show and I have questions, because then I have context. I don't think you're some fly by night scammer. And I do get a lot of scammers contacting me. So that's one of the ways I filter. But yeah, I'm on Facebook, and I have a secret Facebook group for people who I feel are real SSP people. And after I'm sure you're safe, like I'm not going to threaten to kill anybody, because some of our people do. Oh, thank you. Yeah, what I remember, and some of the stuff around it I don't. I will state that when I reintegrate new alters, they fill in pieces that I didn't have before. So things may expand a little, but it's because of new alters. Lou, my shaman partner, has been helping me, and we've gotten 38 of the 2200 alters reintegrated, and it takes a lot of work. But yeah, that some of them have done some really outrageous things. One was a real Valkyrie. Traveled back in time and became a Valkyrie.
That's what we have to get into in the next episode. I think one of the really interesting things is that the Germans have been going back in time and starting colonies. So some of the colonies that are in existence right now are already old, have already been around for centuries. And to me, that is holy.
And they have absolutely no clue who the World War II regime was. And yet, the military-industrial complex wants to go attack them and take World War II back to them. Yeah. They've been out there for centuries. They have no idea who you're talking about. You want to know about who?
It's just such a profoundly different reality and world. You know, what we think we know is like, when you just factor that in, you know, like the time travel element, you know, convolutes everything. You know, like we're not going to be able to get to the bottom of anything now. You know, we're like monkeys, you know, trying to figure out like the exopolitical situation, you know, of like who's who and what's going on, and you know.
Well, there are basically 6 factions out there, and one of them's German, and
6 secret space program,
6 basic secret space programs, and probably 1,000 SAPs that don't even know each other exist.
Special access programs. When you say, is that what you mean? Yeah.
And we're paying for all of it with our taxes.
Through the USAID.
Oh no, it's going through the DoD. and the CIA
okay. Yeah.
and the NSA.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, the three-letter agencies.
Yeah.
When they can't account for trillions of dollars,
That's where it's going.
that's where it's gone.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I've always thought. Yeah.
Anyway,
Wow.
we've
Yeah.
been at this for about 2.5 hours, and
Yes.
we're going to have a hard time uploading this. And
Totally.
it's getting late, at least where Todd is. And I really appreciate you guys having me.
Likewise,
Yes.
I super appreciate this. This has just been a real treat for me, getting to talk to you. And
We have been waiting and waiting for this episode. So,
Well, I can tell you've done your homework. So thank you.
all right. Well, thank you, Penny, so much. Jim, thank you for all that you do. I also want to thank everybody that joined in, asked questions. I want to thank Kurt. Kurt keeps the chats going. He's a great guy. He loves your stuff, Penny. So this was a good one for him as well. So thank you, everybody, so much for joining in and participating. And we hope to see you on the next episode of Paranomaly Beyond Disclosure, where the unknown is just the beginning. Thank you for tuning in with us tonight. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Please be sure to like, subscribe, and follow to receive notifications when new content is made available. A Paranomaly Beyond Disclosure is looking to talk with ufologists, researchers, investigators, contactees, abductees, channelers, and more for upcoming shows. Or if you have stories, photos, videos, questions, suggestions, or comments, please contact us through Messenger or email us at paranomalypodcast@gmail.com. You can also visit us at paranomalypodcast.com for more content and information, including all our social links. I thank you again for watching or listening, and we hope to see you on the next episode of Paranomaly Beyond Disclosure.